This is from 5 years ago. Oh my, it's 30 fucking minutes. Jesus. Okay, I'm definitely gonna have to watch this one in 1.25. Okay, good. That shit's still. Let me drag this out. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So we'll watch it in 1.25. Appreciate the 100, Steven. Even Swag should play Super Fight on stream again. That was some funny grade A dead ass content. I don't know what is Super Fight. When did we play that? Six Alden loves you. Okay. All right.
When I saw the finished episode, I remember feeling a good bit of admiration. With my works, I prefer lighthearted fare, so I have a tendency to avoid serious material. Even if I had written about the same past, it would have become lighter in tone by far. Thanks to this, I felt as though even Dragon Ball had been given a little bit more depth. Toriyama Akira, in regards to the Bardock Special, 2011. When we last checked in with Bardock in 2011, Dragon Ball wasn't exactly at its most mainstream. However, 2013 was a big year for Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball Kami to Kami, God and God or Battle of Gods, hit theaters, marking the first theatrical appearance of Dragon Ball animation in 17 years, with its success paving the way for the current ongoing television series and manga Dragon Ball Super. However, the movie wasn't the only new addition that year. Brand new Toriyama content was introducing material to the Dragon Ball landscape, even if it didn't appear to be at first. Ginga Putoru Jako, or Jako the Galactic Patrolman, a miniseries written by Toriyama Akira and serialized throughout the summer of 2013, told the story of an inept alien policeman sent to Earth to stop some unspecified calamity from befalling. Each chapter subtracted down, and before the series came to a conclusion, it became clear that Jaco's mission was to stop the young Goku from reaching Earth, that the major character Tights was Blooma's never-before-referenced older sister, and that the series was, in fact, another Dragon Ball prequel. Likewise, 2015 was a big year for Dragon Ball, seeing the release of another new, but terrible, movie, and the launch of the aforementioned Dragon Ball Super. However, nestled in between those 2 years was something no less important. When Jako the Galactic Patrolman was collected into book form, it brought along a bonus chapter counting down one more time to the appropriately titled Dragon Ball Minus. Minus was a prequel to the prequel, presenting the situations leading up to the beginning of Jako the Galactic Patrolman, and those events just happened to center around Bardock. Unlike Episode of Bardock, which is pretty safe to assume is a sequel to the Bardock Special, Dragon Ball Minus is clearly a complete reimagining of Goku's origin story. More importantly than that, though, it's just bad. Really bad. Embarrassingly bad. And you may be thinking that given how highly I praise the Bardock Special, I would chafe at any attempt to usurp it. That I hate it simply on principle for not being the Bardock Special. It's an accusation I've had to defend against for 3 years now at this point, and I feel it's something I need to address before I even get started, otherwise people are just going to dismiss everything I say as being blinded by nostalgia. But it's not remotely true. See, I only loosely followed Jako prior to reading Dragon Ball Minus, but I did follow it enough to know that a fresh-off-the-boat Goku briefly appears in it, and it clearly presents a Goku different enough to conclude the two just aren't compatible. So I knew going in that this was going to be totally different. I embraced that. I welcomed it. I looked forward to Toriyama's take on this. I readied myself for the idea that the Bardock Special would be in continuity with the anime, while this new tale would be in continuity with the manga. I also wanted to spell up front the idea that I am disgruntled about Toriyama supposedly contradicting his own manga. For the most part. See, I try to make it a general rule of thumb not to assume things are in continuity unless they are explicitly stated to be. And I'm not sure if this is something I picked up from Curtis Hoffman's old manga summaries or somewhere else, but I definitely recall reading somewhere online, long before I'd seen the Bardock Special.
Hey, Prolast, hold up, Prolast. At this point, bro, just fucking time out Hoffman. The nigga won't. He like at this point, he's just spamming. Like, just time that nigga the fuck out.
And confronting Frieza is in continuity to the manga, there's nothing that explicitly states anything else from the special is. I mean, it certainly seems like that's the case, that Toriyama was referencing the special. For nearly 25 years, it appeared this one piece of animation was canon to the original manga. If I'd been asked prior to 2014, I would have said I probably believed that too. But I had the idea planted in me early enough that I could accept it if it turned out it wasn't. And even if it's something that Toriyama did intend at the time and changed his mind about later, there's no explicit contradiction either. There's nothing to say that the Bardock and Dragon Ball Minus couldn't have changed armor styles, gotten that armor busted up, and then confronted Frieza in a similar manner to the Bardock.
Do y'all think Dragon Ball Minus is bad? I don't really think it's bad. I'm interested to hear what this nigga has to say, but I don't really think Dragon Ball Minus is bad. Like it's not like, oh shit, Dragon Ball minus W, but it's just like an okay ass fucking thing. You've never read it? Should we okay, so should we read it on stream first? Like before we do this? Before we finish the video, should we read the fucking manga on stream? Let me put up a poll. Oh my god. Mm-mm. What's up, Orcus? The E does have 2 dots in the video user. I'll end the poll at like 60, 65 votes. And it looks like a yes. Hold on, let me find this shit online real quick. I'm fairly certain they have it on Manga C. Yeah, here it is. It's on Manga C. So this shit, for anyone who, oh fuck, I'm wrong window. Okay, there we go. So for anyone who doesn't know, this shit is it's basically the first like 30 minutes or so of the Broly movie, but it doesn't focus on any of the Vegeta stuff or any of the Broly stuff. It literally only focuses on the Bardock parts. And since we're reacting to the video, people haven't seen it, I figured we should watch it. So, or not watch it, but read it. So the part that's not in the Broly movie is like Bardock and this one nigga taking out this planet of aliens. Like this is how it starts, and then they get called back. In the Broly movie, we only see them getting called back. Like we only see them on their way back to Planet Vegeta. It's like this scene right here. Bardock's like, you know, obviously skeptical. Why the fuck does Frieza want us back? Talking about the Super Saiyan. Goten and Trunks versus Kawaki, they would beat his ass. Now so this part is weird. Dragon Ball Minus gets a lot of flack for being basically just retconny to shit. Like it has fucking it has Frieza looking for the Super Saiyan and Super Saiyan God, which is kind of weird. You know what I'm saying? Because like Frieza originally was only scared of the Super Saiyan, like he never brought up anything else. You get to see Kid Vegeta and whatnot. Like I said, it's basically like the first 30 or so minutes of the original movie. And this is when Goku gets sent off, and then nothing else. So what the movie adds that this doesn't is it adds that scene where Bardock's shooting back at Frieza's blast, but this doesn't have that. It also Bardock doesn't have this chip in his shoulder of his armor. But yeah, that's basically the whole thing. It's not like it's nothing crazy. That's why I'm like I don't think that it's bad. I think that the manga is just like in a weird spot. You get what I mean?
Bardock in the special. And as for contradicting the Dragon Ball manga itself, While Raditz remembers Goku as a newborn infant, there is nothing in the manga that claims he came to Earth looking like that. The only problem that seems to exist here age-wise is how Goku's age relates to Bluma's, because a 5-year-old Bluma does appear in Jocko. Goku here is said to be at least 3. It looks like Toriyama checked the ages of the characters at the beginning of the manga, where Goku and Bluma are written to be 14 and 16 respectively, 2 years apart in age. And maybe Toriyama forgot that in the next story arc, he changed Goku's age to 12, making them 4 years apart in age, and that just really doesn't work in the Jocko and Minus storyline, but other than that, there's really no problem working it into continuity. The question is, why would you want to? However, I do take issue with anyone claiming it's not fair to compare the Bardock Special and Dragon Ball Minus. I don't plan to spend a whole lot of time doing that here. I mean, I've already covered in depth what I feel works and doesn't work about that story and that character, and there's already more than enough for me to complain about Minus just on its own merits, or lack thereof. But when Toriyama takes a character he didn't create from a popular story that stood on its own for nearly a quarter of a century, a story that he himself has not only praised on multiple occasions, but seemingly referenced in his own series, and then creates a completely new take on the same events, it's not only natural, but completely expected that people are going to compare the two. Especially if the new take doesn't measure up to the standards of the old take, the audience is going to be left wondering what was the point. But that's enough time spent on that. Let's get right into Dragon Ball Minus by really going deep into its plot. Frieza orders all the Saiyans back to planet Vegeta. Bardock gets suspicious, so he and his wife Gine send their son Kakaroto to Earth. Jocko chases after him. The end. That's it. That's all that happens. Okay, remember in my review of the Bardock special, I talked about prequels and how it's difficult to write them well? Remember how I said that prequels often come from backstory, and that backstory does not always naturally fit the structure of a story? Well, the biggest problem with Dragon Ball Minus is that...
By the way, this is like a great example of it. I love new gen Toriyama art. Toriyama's art style post 2013 or so is fucking heat.
It's not a story. It is not a story. And I don't mean that as some kind of hyperbolic, well, it's so bad it doesn't even count as a story. No. Episode of Bardock was a bad story designed to hold up bad fan service, but at least it was a story. Bardock ends up in a new place, meets new people, gets into conflict connected to those people, and resolves that conflict. Dragon Ball Minus isn't even that. There is no storytelling taking place here. It's nothing more than a series of back history bullet points that are actually drawn into a comic. There is almost no characterization, almost nothing happens. Aside from a few character cameos that are so irrelevant as to not be worth mentioning, my 2-sentence summary is literally everything that occurs. The sad part is, this isn't the first time that Toriyama has done this, but it took Dragon Ball Minus for me to realize it. During the original run of the manga, Toriyama wrote Trunks the Story, and I include a liberal helping of air quotes for the term story because, like Minus, it is simply backstory vomited onto a page rather than a story. It took Toei expanding it into a double-length television special to actually turn it into a story, turn it into a journey for Trunks. But this isn't a review of that. I simply bring it up to illustrate that Toriyama does not seem capable of actually writing a standalone prequel story. This kind of stuff can work as character dialogue or a flashback within another story, but by itself, it doesn't do anything but sit there. And yes, even though it is included with the Jocko material, it is still presented as a standalone bonus chapter rather than a serialized segment. I mean, I complained that the Bardock special was in too much of a hurry, but Dragon Ball Minus moves along at a completely breakneck pace. There is just no chance to get to know any of these people in any meaningful way. I almost get the feeling that Toriyama is banking on people already knowing who Bardock is, therefore he doesn't have to really introduce the character. However, this is a completely new Bardock with a different personality, different motivations, and a completely different attitude toward his son. And again, I don't have a problem with that, in theory. I was a big Tenchi Muyo fan growing up. In one continuity, his mother is one character, and in another continuity, his mother is a totally different person. I grew up watching 60s Batman, Tim Burton's Batman, Batman the Animated Series Batman, and 1940s serial Batman, and if you haven't watched my reviews on them, you really should. I understand that you can have multiple characters share the same name, appearance, and general history, but be completely different. But you can't have it both ways. It would be absolutely ridiculous if viewers sat down to the 1989 Batman movie only to be told, you guys all watch the Adam West series, right? You know this guy. No! They're two completely different characters. If we're starting fresh with a new Bardock, I have to actually understand who he is. And I just don't. I come away from this knowing very little about him. I mean, I have the basics. He kills people, he has a wife, he loves his son. That's about it. I mean, I can't really do much of a character deconstruction of the main character here because...
This might be the first Mr. Fusion video I don't like. I watched like all 27 parts of the Boo Saga thing. This might be the first one I don't like. Like deadass, the first video I don't like. Does it really matter if these characters just aren't that important, but you just get some Dragon Ball bonus content? I don't think I really care. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I get that it's like a, you know, this is Mystery Fusion. What the hell? This is his name right there. I don't know. I mean, like, you just get some extra content on the lore of Dragon Ball. I don't think that the people have to be particularly relatable or well known for that to happen. Like we don't need to know Bardock for this story to exist and be okay. I mean, I guess it's kind of a bad thing that you could just replace Bardock with any like do-gooder and have him send Goku away. But I mean, I guess it makes more sense for it to be his father of all people. But yeah, I mean, it's literally just bonus content. He only cares about the stories. The fact that minus isn't a story is insulting to him. I mean, I get that. I can get that. You know, the fact that this isn't a story is insulting to him. I just don't get why. Like, Bardock is Goku's dad. He saved Goku from certain death. Oh, and look, this is what Goku's mom looks like for everyone who's been wondering all these years. I don't see the problem for this. Like I deadass don't see a problem with Toriyama just throwing this together and showing us for some bonus shit in a manga. Am I tweaking? Is replacing the original more in-depth story? I mean, I guess. I don't know.
There's nothing to say. There's no journey. There's no arc. So, honestly, all I'm really left with is comparing him to the Bardock and the Bardock special. Let me go ahead and say this. By saying I want to know a character, I don't necessarily mean I have to have his life history spelled out for me. I don't know much about the original Bardock's history, but I spend enough time with him, see him react to enough circumstances and hardships that I have a feel for what makes the character tick. I see how he acts around his friends, I see how he handles enemies, I see his priorities reflected in the reaction to his son's low battle power readout. I see him go on a journey, from a person happily loyal to Frieza to one who will stand alone against him, risking everything. This Bardock is clearly different from that. He doesn't get psychic powers, he has some other friend slash co-worker than the ones we saw in the Bardock special. He's certainly more of a family man, and he cares enough about his son to give up his own one shot at surviving to make sure his son gets away safely. I'm not saying those aren't admirable traits, and I'm not saying that Bardock has to be mustache-twirlingly evil or think his son is trash. The original Bardock clearly cared for his comrades, after all. I'm not fond of how this reflects on Goku's story, but I'll get to that later. I'm just saying there's not much to this Bardock beyond how he's different from the other Bardock. Now, I've heard some people throw out the argument that Bardock figuring out that Frieza is going to destroy the planet is more satisfying than him being given the answer by psychic magic plot convenience. And I might be inclined to agree with those people, if we ever saw Bardock figure anything out. I mean, this is all pretty simplistic. Frieza commands every single Saiyan to come back to the planet so he can destroy them all at once, although he's too damn lazy to actually wait until they all come back. And his men are asking around about Super Saiyans, the legend of the Saiyan that is stronger than anyone else, including Frieza. I honestly can't tell if Bardock is making a ridiculously paranoid leap in logic that just happens to be right, or if all the other Saiyans are just ridiculously stupid to not be able to put two and two together. Either way, it doesn't feel like any kind of mystery is being unraveled here. For that matter, both Bardock and his subordinate already seem predisposed to not trusting Frieza. Again, it doesn't have to be the same as the Bardock special, but there just doesn't seem to be anywhere for him to go character-wise. He starts out not trusting Frieza, so his one solitary action in the chapter is to sneak around behind Frieza's back. I just don't think it's as interesting. This Bardock is made to stand out, though. It's said that his willingness to save his own son is due to the influence of his wife, Gine. Now, Bardock is the main character of Dragon Ball Minus, but Guinea was the character fans were hyped about seeing and was promoted pretty heavily. Finally, we get to meet Goku's mom! As I said, I tried to come into this as open to a new story as I possibly could be, but I admit I was feeling trepidation about Guinea the moment she was announced. To me, it felt like fan service, world building for no other sake than for itself. Guinea was going to be important only to those who needed a name to fill into Goku's fictional character biography. Hell, even worse, the soundbites were already coming in that Bardock and Guinea were different, that most Saiyans didn't have families, but that Guinea was just so special and didn't care for fighting, and she tamed Bardock and taught him to love another nauseating tripe like that. And yeah, I'd say the final result does bear that out. It's pretty much just in clunky exposition, but it's there. And I don't really care for it. If there was a story here, if Toriyama was giving me enough to make me care about Bardock and Guinea, I might be able to accept this, although it would have to be a pretty damn good story. But as it stands, it really just comes...
Hey, bro, I'm not gonna lie. I disagree with almost everything in this video. Like, I don't know, to me, bro, I care about both of these niggas just because they birthed this guy. And the shit I read this nigga go through, it makes me care about both of them. Like, I already care by default. I already wanted to see Goku's mom by default.
across as a trite way of connecting Goku to his parents. It implies that Goku is pure-hearted because his parents were already nicer than your average Saiyan, and I feel that diminishes what makes Goku special. However, I've heard defenders of Dragon Ball Minus posit the idea that this makes the story all the more heartbreaking. Goku declares that the Saiyans were evil and got their just rewards at the hands of Frieza, never knowing that his own parents, in whom he never showed the slightest bit of interest, actually gave their own lives to save his.
That's what's up. That's heat.
And, okay, you got me there. That is an idea full of dramatic potential. However, it's all potential. The problem lies in the storytelling, or better yet, the lack thereof. I can only connect to that on a generalized level, because I don't know Bardock and Guinea well enough to truly empathize with them. And at the end of the day, their story is irrelevant to Dragon Ball as a whole. The Bardock Special story is irrelevant to Dragon Ball as a whole too. They stand alone as self-contained works. As such, there is never an impact on Goku, so there's never any kind of payoff to this emotional setup. At least so far there hasn't been, and that is not an invitation to bring this up again in a later Dragon Ball work. Let's just all forget about Dragon Ball Minus, shall we? Just like with Bardock, perhaps even more so since she's seen even less, we just don't spend enough time with her to know her as anything but a June Cleaver-esque, special snowflake alien housewife. The only thing I like about her is that she wears armor with a skirt. It's cute, and I want one. But a bad story, or non-story in this case, as it relates to Bardock and Guinea, while frustrating, especially in light of how good the Bardock special was, isn't exactly earth-shattering. As I said, it's a standalone work. However, it's also the backstory of Goku. So what shifts this from disappointingly frustrating to absolutely infuriating is how it retroactively influences future Dragon Ball events. First off, hey look, it's Raditz as a kid! That stupid old Bardock special didn't show him, but now we get to see him for no reason at all, so he can contribute nothing to the plot. I mean, it's nice that Bardock and Guinea reference that they have another son, but this is part of the reason I gave the Bardock special a pass for not having him in it. If he's not going to have a reason for being there, it's better to just ignore him. But poor Raditz. He's really gotten a bad rap over the years. After all the world-shattering changes he brought to Dragon Ball, he was killed off, mocked by his comrades, and then never mentioned again. And he's not really treated much better in Minus, because it turns out he doesn't know anything. Most of the revelations Raditz reveals to Goku have been retconned away in subsequent years. Planet Vegeta was destroyed by a meteor? Nope, turns out it was Frieza. And now, even the idea that Goku was sent to Earth to destroy it is undone. He's sent to Earth to save his own life. His parents even tell him not to look at the full moon for some reason. Guinea
Bro, I just don't get this, bro. I just don't get it.
says she'll tell Raditz about this, but I guess she never gets the chance. I mean, there's this big hullabaloo about secrecy. That's why Bardock and Guinea stay behind, because they're afraid they'll be detected if there are three of them. Bardock even reminds his coworker to turn off his scouter before they start bad-mouthing Frieza. But you're telling me Bardock and Guinea are going to take as big of a risk as stealing a space pod and shooting their toddler's son off the planet, which is an explicit contradiction of Frieza's orders, but they're not going to do anything to warn Raditz? Okay, maybe they assumed he'd be returning to the planet and they could tell him then. But that wouldn't make much sense because now he'd be stuck on the one place you don't want him to be, and would need his own stolen space pod to leave again and hopefully not be detected. so it makes more sense to try to warn him before he got back to keep him away. But I guess they're too afraid to send transmissions that might be detected. But if the actual Dragon Ball manga is still to be believed, things eventually come to such a head that Bardock openly defies and stands against Frieza at the very end. Okay, so at that point, what does he have to lose? Use a scouter! Let all the remaining Saiyans, including your son, know Frieza screwed you over as your last act of rebellion. Or don't. Just let Raditz spend the rest of his life continuing to work for Frieza, who wants all Saiyans dead, and which is ultimately going to lead to a battle to the death with his younger brother. This is so stupid! So at this point, really the only bit of truth Raditz has to tell Goku is that he's an alien. Then there's the problem that Dragon Ball Minus, quite frankly, is a complete and total ripoff of Superman's backstory, and in a way that really damages some of the concepts the series had played with ever since Goku's alien origins were added to the story. And all the naysayers cry out that Goku's origin was already similar to Superman's, and I'm not going to deny for a second that I've heard people making the comparisons for years. However, as it exists prior to Minus, I really don't see any similarities beyond the broadest sense. They're both babies sent to Earth near the destruction of their home planet, and they both become heroes of their adoptive planets. That's it. Certainly worthy of drawing parallels, but also substantially different from one another. Superman was sent to Earth for his own safety. In certain continuities, it was even expected that he would become Earth's savior. Goku's story was different though, as I talked about in my Saiyan Arc Part 6 video. Goku had spent years building himself up, taking on all comers, saving the world from the Red Ribbon Army and Piccolo. Then he comes to find out that he was supposed to have been a greater threat than all of them. Had things gone according to plan, he would have destroyed the world. But in the irony to end all ironies, not only did he not do that, it was thanks to him that Earth didn't fall to other conquering powers. Then of course there's Vegeta, an elite warrior who had access to all the privileges and opportunities that granted him. Goku was considered weak and worthless, and was therefore sent off to a trash planet to do a trash job. And it was only because of that he grew into the person he became. It was only because of that he won the respect and training of various masters and gods. And it was only because of that time and time again, Goku proved himself to be better than the Saiyan ideal, Vegeta. So yes, there were superficial similarities to Superman, but in execution they really couldn't have been any more different. But this? I half expected Bardock to put his hand on the space pod and say, "They can be a great people, Kal-El Karato. They wish to be. They only lack the light to show them the way." So completely gone is the idea that Goku was sent to Earth to destroy it by his barbaric race, but through a twist of fortune ended up becoming good. Instead, he was sent there by his loving parents to keep him safe. In fact, really the only difference between this and Superman's backstory is that Bardock is a soldier for a planet conqueror instead of a brilliant scientist.
I I I don't get this shit, bro. The Like, who cares? Realistically, bro. Why does it matter if it's just similar to Superman? I guess like, okay, on Krypton or whatever, Superman was sent away because of just imminent danger. They knew this was gonna happen. Bardock is like, I'm just gonna do this in case it happens. In case it happens, I'll send Kakarot away. I mean, he ended up being right. I don't know.
It's exactly what I feared. It takes the wonderful irony of Goku's past and turns it into what was expected to happen. It makes Goku too special, or specifically it makes his origin too special. His parents were aberrations who loved each other and showed affection to their children. They're the only ones who figured out what Frieza was up to and took the steps that ultimately led to Frieza's defeat. It's just too pat. Again, the Bardock special walked that tightrope almost perfectly. It gave Bardock just enough pathos and uniqueness that you could sympathize with him as the protagonist, but it didn't make him out to be anything more than just an evil thug. It played with the idea of him trying to do something to make a difference to his fate and his son's fate, but he ultimately failed, which makes Frieza's memories of him tragically humorous. He was just that guy who got in the way at the last second, and nothing special about him was ever known. And again, it's not a plot hole per se. You can easily rationalize that obviously Vegeta didn't know the real story, Raditz apparently never got the real story either, so they're saying what they think is true. I don't understand, though, how anyone can use that justification with a straight face. Is that really what's important? That we technically avoided a plot hole? Because I happen to think the themes that were lost due to this are much more important than whether or not we can bend over backwards to justify the inclusion of Dragon Ball Minus. Look, Goku's and Piccolo's late addition alien backgrounds alter the way the previous story elements are perceived as well. But love them or hate them, they added a lot to the story. We met new characters, went to different planets, found new transformations and enemies. What does this do? It doesn't add anything substantial. It just takes things away. Is it really worth invalidating what Raditz and Vegeta say to Goku? I don't think so. Finally, I want to address one more point I see tossed around. That it's not fair to compare Dragon Ball Minus to the Bardock special, or to be too hard on it at all, because Dragon Ball Minus is just a little 16-page bonus chapter. You can't expect it to be able to tell a complex story or hold it up to the same level as a 45-minute piece of information. To that, I say, if you can't effectively tell the backstory of Dragon Ball's protagonist in 16 pages, maybe you should reconsider doing it at all.
Yeah.
I mean, that is kind of the point.
I knew that's what he was going to say.
There's a lot of stuff here. 2 characters we have to get to know, Saiyan Society, Frieza's motivation for wiping out an entire people. That is not something you can just skim through like Dragon Ball Minus does. That you can't tell that kind of story in 16 pages is obvious. That's not an excuse though, because Toriyama and whoever...
It's not what it's trying to do though. It's just blatantly not what the chapter tries to do. I agree. Like, I think if Dragon Ball Minus was longer, it would be better.
Else was
I just don't think that this is bad.
And it's not like this needed to exist. Jocko was already a complete series on its own. It already told its story, a story of much smaller scope, I might add, over the course of 11 chapters. Dragon Ball Minus is marketing material, incentive to pick up the collected Jocko, nothing more. If this is a story Toriyama really wanted to tell, I find it hard to believe anyone would have objected to him making it longer so that it could be told properly. But okay, let's assume that the book had to be that size, no longer, and that Toriyama was approached about this idea and was too polite to turn them down, or whatever the legal ramifications are. This story is going to be written, and it's going to be 16 pages. In that case, don't waste precious panel space on pointless crap. Did we really need to see Raditz and Vegeta when they contribute nothing? Did we really need to waste 2 pages with the Galactic Patrol sending out Jocko when we just got done reading the story that already told us that? Did we really need to spend 2 pages with Frieza? Not to see him come to a decision to kill the Saiyans, but just expositing to a minion that he's going to do it, as in stuff we already know. Oh, I guess it had to be there so that Frieza could name-drop Super Saiyan God, which was a newly introduced and popular transformation when this book came out, and has nothing to do with any of the events we see here. There. I just gave you 4 whole pages, a quarter of this entire chapter, that you could have used to actually make me care about Bardock and Guinea. When I first started Dragon Ball Dissection, I claimed that there was no part of Dragon Ball I hated.
I've never heard him get that heated. He did not get that heated throughout the whole Buu saga like Dissection. Never heard him get that heated.
This didn't exist then. In fact, and I say this without exaggeration, and having had 3 years to digest this material, this may very well be the worst thing to ever carry the Dragon Ball name. Ultimately, it's plain and simple. There's no story here. It's just a bunch of, ooh, look, it's Goku's parents. Ooh, look, it's Vegeta and Raditz's kids. Ooh, look at all the shiny new backstory. What a waste. It's just so lazy. No thought was put into any of this. I'd rather it not have been written, which is a shame because Jocko the Galactic Patrolman is really good. But between this and the abysmal episode of Bardock, I'd say it's clear they need to put this character on a shelf and never, ever use him again. Honestly, just based on the ending of the Bardock special, it seems obvious why he should never be used again. Bardock continues to be used because he's marketable, not because anyone wants to tell any good stories with him. And if you can't tell a story with him, he shouldn't be used. It's as simple as that. It's just a shame, though, that a character who started out as something unique and special to Dragon Ball has ended up like this. It's just fascinating to look at all of them. Bardock represents the Dragon Ball prequel in all of its forms. From the story that tread carefully to present a kind of narrative Dragon Ball normally couldn't tell, tragic and, dare I say it, even complex, to a story that gave in to the temptations to throw a lot of cool stuff at the audience whether or not it made any sense, to a bunch of backstory regurgitated onto a page without any more thought or care than that, just because it takes less effort to lure in fans with world building and character cameos and never-before-seen parents than it does to actually tell a story. Well, that was fun, wasn't it? Thanks for joining me the past couple of months on this journey through the stories of Bardock. It's been quite an exhilarating challenge distilling all of my thoughts on these outlying pieces of the Dragon Ball franchise, but next time we return to the main story already in progress.
I mean, it's not bad. The video wasn't bad. I don't really fuck with the opinion though. I don't fuck with the opinion at all. Speaking of which, Or not speaking of which, I don't know why I said speaking of which. What I'm about to say is not related whatsoever. I got this new chair, and it was like the way it was marketed, it said it had 3D armrests. And I was like, what the fuck does that mean? So like I can move the armrest depending on how I'm sitting in the chair. Like right now I'm sitting up. So I jack them up so I can fucking like put my damn arms on it. But if I like lean back, I can move them back. Pretty cool. It's your third time bringing up the chair. Bro, the chair is good. I haven't bought a good chair in a while.